At this point, we're ready to move on to that conversation on the economic potential and likely benefits of the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano Gas Pipeline project. And joining us for that is Sam Ndukwe, former top management staff of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, former General Manager, Gas Pipelines Infrastructure, former Group General Manager, NNPC Power, former Managing Director, NNPC Gas and Power Investment Limited, Coordinator, the West African Gas Pipeline Project, and currently Managing Director, DVL Engineering Limited. Mr. Ndukwe, good morning and welcome to the Morning Show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ruben.
Good morning. Good to see you again. But quickly, I mean, many commentators observe that Nigeria is even a gas-producing country, not necessarily an oil-bearing country, considering our gas endowment. Now, can you offer us a brief description of the gas endowment at the disposal of Nigeria and how so far we have been able to manage it or mismanage it?
Well, Ruben, thank you very much, and thank you, the entire team from Arise TV this morning. And I'm happy to join you far away from the UK.
You're welcome.
I am happy today that we're discussing a project which has taken us almost 30 years to realize. We have a lot of gas, no doubt. We have about 187 trillion to 205 trillion. The figure is not settled between the DPR and all that, so it's not a firm figure because it keeps changing every day. So the bottom line remains that we have a lot of gas, and we have not even looked for this gas. We found the gas itself by accident. What do I mean by accident? We're looking for crude oil, and in the process, we find gas. We are producing crude oil. In the process of that, we produce gas. And that's what comes together to about this 205 TCF of gas. And what we are doing with this gas is very simple. Currently, we are utilizing some part of the gas for export in terms of LNG, LPG. We're also utilizing a great quantity of gas for the power generation industry in Nigeria. And some of the industries around Lagos and Port Harcourt are using natural gas for their process. So precisely the way we are managing this gas is that a little bit of it is still being flared. We were looking at initially about 20% at a time, but now happily NNPC, through its joint venture partners, have been able to reduce the gas flare to anything between 10 and 7%. So precisely, the gas is supposed to enable us to develop industries, to industrialize Nigeria. But the reach of natural gas to some of these places, some of these remote production areas, is a major area of concern. And therefore, when we hear things like AKK happening in our lifetime and other projects that are being lined up by NNPC, we should be glad and should be happy that it's happening under our purview. Thank you, Ruben.
Can you tell us more about the AKK project? That's the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano project, which was flagged off by President Buhari. What is it about?
The AKK represents Ajaokuta, Abuja, Kaduna, and Kano pipeline. This is a 614-kilometer pipeline. It is about 40-inch diameter. You can imagine what 40-inch. A little kid can just walk across the diameter of the pipeline. That's what we are trying to put in place. And it's going to impact every state on that line pipe axis within Ajaokuta, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano. And how is it going to impact them? What it means is that gas will then be available at their corridor. And they will be in a position to hook up to natural gas for purposes of power generation, for purposes of industrialization. And if you've been hearing all the state government, everybody's talking about industrial park. It will not happen without natural gas because the industries will need gas immediately they come on board. And then they will require that natural gas to be able to activate their processes. We know how our industries are currently suffering. Everybody's doing self-generation. So we will get to a situation where embedded power and all that will begin to happen. So AKK is an enabler for the northern axis. And by the way, the AKK we're talking about is a subset of the trans-Nigerian gas pipeline system. The trans-Nigerian gas pipeline system encompasses other pipeline systems that requires to be built. Some of them are already ongoing, some of them are completed. So that is what AKK is all about.
Right. I'd like to know about the security of this pipeline when it's finally done, and how we can incorporate the community, because that has constantly been a challenge. Although not a gas pipeline, but I was evident. I saw the evidence of the disastrous effect of the lack of security on pipelines with what happened in JSA. In fact, I was on ground in JSA in 1998, seeing what happened, and it was quite very scary for me. How do you bring the communities in? And secondly, Dr. Apache raised a strong point yesterday of the geopolitics of this. The gas will be coming up from the east, and it's going to the north, providing jobs for them in the north at the expense of people down here up to the east. We've constantly talked about the fact that there's restiveness in the Niger Delta. How will this provide jobs? And what are the projections of job provision as regards this? Two questions, sir.
Thank you. When we designed the pipeline system, of which I managed the design of the pipeline system, the intention was not just to do the AKK. The AKK was a subset. There is a segment of the line which originates from Calabar all the way to Ajokuta. And the intention is to be able to spread this development to the east. And that has not happened at the moment. But I know that NNPC is looking at the phase 2, which is the Calabar to Ajokuta via Enugu, Umuahia, and all that. So the intention is that most of the gas that's going to come to the AKK will come from Imo State. And so precisely that gas will pass through the Obiafo-Obricom pipeline, which is about to be completed. The Obiafo-Obricom pipeline is a major infrastructure. It's even bigger than the AKK in terms of diameter. And it will ferry that gas all the way to Oben. And from Oben, it will be there towards Ajokuta, where they are currently enjoying gas. That's why we need to tune that gas. When it comes to security, let me tell you the truth. The truth of the matter is that government, even the army, cannot secure a pipeline. I've been in the pipeline business for 30-something years. You cannot secure the pipeline. What will secure the pipeline is the peace of mind you enjoy with the local community. Even NNPC is making a lot of effort to involve the community in the protection of the pipeline. So during construction, a lot of these guys will be employed along the axis of the pipeline, even beyond the axis. Some of the people will come from the east to build the pipeline. And when they finish building the pipeline, there's a tendency that they have learned a lot of things. One of them is the welding skills. Welding a 40-inch pipe. I will urge any of us to visit during the construction. When you see the massive nature of the diameter of the pipeline and how it's being welded out, you will appreciate that anybody who has that kind of skill is not just a roadside welder. He is a professional welder, and they are graded and certified along so that they can do other jobs. So this is an opportunity that will be created for the local people. They will now become professional welders, and they can migrate into other projects which are being executed by the oil companies and NNPC. And that is one thing that we're going to leave behind for them. Another thing that we're going to leave behind for them is that industries will spring up along the pipeline axis. The power plants NNPC building, that is one thing I want to emphasize. This pipeline doesn't make sense if you don't have an off-taker. You will be there rotting away. And therefore, NNPC started thinking ahead. And during my regime, we had about 3,600 megawatts of power plant, which we had planned. 1,350 at Abuja, 900 at Kaduna, and another 1,350 at Kano. And the intention is that they will suck all this gas in and they utilize it for power generation. And then by that way, they will make them a little bit independent on the axis of the pipeline in such a way that they take away the load of having to transport and ferry gas all the way, ferry power, all the way from Niger Delta and Lagos to Kano and Kaduna axis. And that is the intention of this project. And I believe that because it is a great enabler, and I believe it has a multiplier effect in terms of job creation, and I believe because the state government will be able to realize their vision of industrialization, of empowerment. And then that's going to take down the issue of security in this country. Why are people agitating? Why are people restive? They are restive because of joblessness. And because of joblessness, they are prepared to do anything. They can blow pipelines out of anger. But when you keep them busy, industries are bubbling, they can wake up every morning and go to their work, and they will not have the same challenge that everybody is having right now. Thank you, Ruben.
Well, Mr. Ndukwe, I don't think you have quite addressed the issue of the politics of it. Before you joined us, we were talking about the auction of 57 marginal fields with stakeholders in the Niger Delta saying, look, if they don't get 10% of it, then there will be problems. And with regard to even the AKK, there have been complaints. There is a resource politics side to it. The AKK is supposed to pipe from Asa in Imo State about 3.5 cubic feet of gas all the way to the north. That's even more than what we have on the Escravos Lagos gas pipeline. And people of the Niger Delta are saying, yes, okay, you're taking gas up north. But in the Niger Delta, we still have the problem of associated gas and gas flaring with implications for the environment and climate change. Now, is the AKK not going to shortchange the people of the Niger Delta? Are you aware of any program in place to address the concerns of the people of the Niger Delta in this political side of the problem?
The Niger Delta has all the gas resources currently. Wherever it is, we're taking that gas from the Niger Delta and we're heading to the north. Yes, it is a major concern. And during the time of the design of the pipeline, we were very conscious of this fact. So we had we had a plan to do the CAP. And the CAP, Niger Delta and the south, we expect NNPC to begin to use the same model they use for AKK to begin to implement the CAP. Like you rightly said, you call that gas on the Niger Delta without agitation, because so very conscious. Over time, they have learned so much. They know the economics, they know the commercials, and they are well represented, even in the National Assembly. People will speak, people will cry. We don't have to wait for that to happen. When they begin to rupture pipelines, time now will now wake up and begin to do palliatives. There is no amount of palliative that will work here, apart from making sure that the gas is also utilized in the axis of the south, south, and southeast geopolitical zone. So precisely, there's a mitigation that went to quickly start happening. You need to tell the Niger Delta people the AKK is only a phase one, which is the way we design it. Well, the CAP. We are doing AKK. We need to flip around and begin to do CAP concurrently. Because if we don't do CAP, there's a likelihood that people will feel shortchanged. And they will wait for you. You are going to operate a 614-kilometer pipeline. Some of that will be taking gas from the Niger Delta. And what we are seeing currently in the Escravos area, where we are producing gas, the pipelines are being blown every now and then, until recently, when NNPC put a model that ensures that the community is taken along. So it is a matter of economics. If it is not settled in terms of what is in there for me, the tendency for the pipeline to be challenged, and the gas and in the chain is the gas source, which rests in Imo State and the Niger Delta. I don't know if I've given a cogent answer to what you asked.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yes.
Why did it take this long, though, to get to construction phase, seeing as Nigeria has been exploring hydrocarbon in commercial quantity since 1956?
Well, in my lifetime in NNPC, with 34 years, we built only very few systems. But I tell you something, pipeline business takes a long time to mature. The gestation period is a little bit long because of the kind of money you spend up front. Remember that once you lay this pipeline, there is no going back. You can't exhume it. You can't carry it away again. It stays there until it begins to do what you ask it to do. The pipeline takes time for too many reasons. One of them is that the planning element of it, and unfortunately this pipeline, the AKK itself, is challenged by the fact that federal government doesn't have the deep pocket to fund $3 billion investment. And when they do, they also encumber it by asking you to borrow a bit of that money. And because you are borrowing third-party money, the tendency is that those third parties will ask a couple of questions. Where is the commerciality of what we are bringing money to do? Who is going to keep the money? In what currency? What's the legal regime? And we know that all these things are balls in the air at the moment. They're all rolling. The law concerning the oil industry has been there sitting, I don't know how many years now. And when we tried to do the gas law, it was shut down by the Senate, even though the House passed it. So it's a best endeavor for everybody at the moment. So what we're doing for that since 1956, when we started producing gas, all over the world, gas didn't quite have value until recently. As we speak, in the US, about 38% of power generation is from gas. In the UK, here where I sit, it's about 41%. But they are complemented with renewable energy of other types. They also complemented with nuclear energy and coal. But unfortunately for us in Nigeria, 80% of our power generation is coming from gas. And the starting point would have been things like AKK power plant, the 1320 megawatts of power units that we have. That's one of the best examples we can give. So it takes a long time to align issues around commercial, geopolitics, finances, which is now creeping up because we're borrowing money. And that's why it took AKK all this while. We would have done AKK if we had a budget to do it at the time we were doing it. So now that we have aligned with the borrowing, which is coming from the Chinese, and the equity, which is coming from NNPC's pocket, that's the part that AKK will be fast-tracked because the funding seems to be aligned because the third-party financing is on board and NNPC is funding upfront its own equity of the pipeline. So precisely, it is a matter of commerciality. It's a matter of, like you say, geopolitics. And like you say, it's not a tea party because you need to just not build a pipeline. You also need to have a power plant. Okay. This power plant, again, I repeat, will be challenged if NNPC does not implement the 3.6 gigawatts of power asset, which is tied to this project.
Okay. I want us to double click on the. I want us to double click on the money. This money coming from China, another exposure to China. I don't know how much the Chinese are bringing into this, but we have some exposure to China. Isn't that going to raise eyebrows? I want us to double click on the commerciality. How much will this money put back to the NNPC purse? What's going to be the level of transparency around this project? Because I asked that, and pardon me if I asked that a la PNID. All right, so what's going to be the level of transparency behind this? And most importantly, how is this going to trickle down? How is this going to help to bring those 100 million people out of poverty in Nigeria?
Well, when you borrow money, the intention is not that you mix it up with your operations money. So there will be a ring fence, I suppose, around. That's what we had in mind at the time. The project will be ring-fenced in such a way that it is an entity quite different from NNPC that will manage the pipeline asset. The revenue stream for this, for the repayment of the loan, is going to come from tariffs, both from the tariffs of this pipeline and other assets owned by NNPC. So there will be a funnel bringing in money that will be used to offset the loan. On top of that is the guarantee from federal government, which is the sovereign guarantee, which protects the funding institution. So to answer your question specifically, NNPC is not going to manage this project as one of its assets. It will ring fence the project in such a way that the money, there's a clear visibility as to the revenue stream coming in to be able to clean out the loan as we go further. So once you hear NNPC equity, what it means is that NNPC is taking equity in the company that owns the pipeline. I happen to have managed the West African pipeline, and that is the model we are coming up with. NNPC is just an investor in the West African pipeline. He owns about 25%. There are other people who own the rest of the percent, including the countries where the pipeline passed. So this model is going to be used. Unfortunately, fortunately for us, that model is tweaked in such a way that the tariff that is going to come from this pipeline and from other pipeline assets owned by an NPC will be used to offset the loan. And that's the clear visibility and transparency that is required. There are so many institutions that are currently working on this project in such a way that the issue of clear visibility as to the revenue stream on the project is established from day one.
The trickle down to the hoi polloi, the people that are suffering, 100 million people that are in poverty. How are they going to feel the impact of this?
Okay, the gas is of no use to individual if it is not converted either to energy or to process. What I mean by process is that if you don't put it into a process to generate something, either fertilizer, either petrochemical, that is the time the natural gas itself becomes useful. At the time we planned this project, we had in mind that kind of milestone. What is it that will impact Nigerians currently? Steady power supply. Steady power supply, how do we achieve that? We're already achieving certain amount. I don't know what it is now. We keep ranging from 4,000 to 7,000 megawatts. If we add a little to that and do it in such a way that regional performance can be measured so that there is power generation among the regions in such a way that we don't have to depend on Osogbo Center to distribute all the power that we require. That was my advocacy at that time. Therefore, NNPC, during this planning stage, said the only way this pipeline will make sense to the ordinary Nigerian is to transform that gas into power. That power then now trickles down to the different homes, different industry, different SMEs, even the small man who is in the doing business on along the pipeline axis will begin to feel the impact of this gas. Industries can set up like fertilizer industries because of the agricultural nature of that area we're discussing. Ammonia fertilizer could be a basis for us to move forward. If we set up an ammonia plant in such a way that we generate resources that will immediately impact agriculture in those areas. Another thing, you are talking about 100 million coming out of poverty. What are we talking about? We are saying that they should go into a production process, not lining the streets.
Well, Mr.
And that is what NNPC had planned to do when he laid the pipeline design in place.
Mr. Ndukwe, let's talk a little more about gas flaring. You said earlier on that Nigeria has been able to reduce the rate to about between 7 to 10%. That's still a lot, considering the implications for public health, the environment, climate change. And you recall that in the past, we've been told gas flaring will end by so period, one deadline after another, and we've not been able to achieve the objective. What exactly is the problem? What is it that needs to be done to address this problem of gas flaring?
For those of us who've had the privilege of flying across production processes, you see flares. Like if you're going from Escravos and you're coming to Warri or Port Harcourt, you see flares in the swampy terrain. I have to emphasize that the location of this flare is really a challenge. If at the middle of a swamp you have flares, what it means therefore is that for you to extinguish that flare, you need to find your way to the swamp by way of pipelines, by way of asset. Remember, what is being flared is not totally methane. What I mean by methane is not a gas that you can use immediately. It could just be a combination of crude oil and gas. Therefore, you need to knock off the crude oil by way of process. And then you have a clean gas which you can transform to power generation. That costs money. And the producers, the investors, because the federal government doesn't even have the money to do the major ones in the land, not talk of the ones you find in the swamp. They keep bringing investors, and the investors keep saying, what is in there for me? And the bottom line is, what is my take? The take is this: you need to invest money to clean out the gas. You need to invest the money to pipe the gas.
Well,
Question is, when are you going to do that?
Well, on that note, Mr. Ndukwe, we just have to thank you very much for joining us this morning on The Morning Show and for the brilliant insights you've offered into the AKK project.